Alright guys, we are picking up where we left off, talking about the health belief model. This model uses the perception of the threat of a health problem and the appraisal of recommended behaviors for prevention or managing the problem. So here, the action depends on the occurrence of three different things. There has to be an existence of a health concern. There has to be a perceived threat, and there has to be perceived barriers that can be overcome. So, there's a perceived susceptibility and a severity, perceived benefits of an action, perceived barriers to an action, cues to action, and self-efficacy. So let's take a look at this a little bit further. Here we have our health belief model, and we're talking about these individual beliefs here. So let's take an example of an individual watching TV, and they see a commercial for exercise. And let's say that they're pretty sedentary and they have a family history of heart disease. So they start thinking about it, and he or she thinks about a class that they've taken, perhaps in college, about education, health education, and how heart disease can cause heart attack and cause problems down the road. And so this person perceives susceptibility to a disease. They start thinking, I have a family history. Perhaps they had a little bit of elevated blood pressure at their last physical exam. So they're feeling susceptible to this disease process. They perceive the severity of the disease. They realize that there are health consequences if they don't change their behaviors. They also note the perceived benefits of preventative action. So they understand that exercise is important and it's good and it can keep you healthy and reduce your risk of heart disease. They perceive that there may be barriers to this action. However, they have a self-efficacy that they can overcome the problems or the barriers. And this all leads to those individual behaviors. This is what springs them to action. They believe that they are susceptible to disease. They believe that there are health consequences to that disease. But they believe that there's also benefits to changing their health behavior, having a sedentary lifestyle. They know that there will be barriers, but that they are competent and they have a self-efficacy high enough to overcome those barriers. And this changes their behavior. There also may be cues to action, maybe media campaigns, a physician, asking them about or reminding them, coaching them, friends and family members. If maybe that person's father just had a heart attack, this is a cue to action to change those behaviors. So all of those constructs are built into this health belief model. And here it kind of defines those constructs again. There's definitions for each of those: perceived susceptibility, severity, the benefits, barriers, cues to action, and self-efficacy. All right, and our last theory here under our intrapersonal theories is the Transthetical Model, also known as the stages of change. And this model or theory uses readiness to change as an attempt to change behaviors towards a more healthy behavior. So there are different stages. I'm going to go to our other slide here. There are different stages to this model. It starts with pre-contemplation, and so we're looking at where this person may be on this stages of change. They may be in pre-contemplation, so they're not even thinking about the behavior, or they're unaware that it's a problem. So let's think about someone with moderate to heavy alcohol use. So someone in the pre-contemplation phase may not even realize that their drinking is an issue. Contemplation, they've started thinking about making a change. Perhaps they've realized that their drinking is having some negative effects on their lives, but they're not completely committed to quitting or to cutting back yet. Preparation, they're ready to take action. They've created a plan. They've taken some steps to cut out alcohol from their lives. Action, they've been engaged in a new behavior. So let's say that they cut out alcohol from their life altogether for less than 6 months. They're in the action phase. And then maintenance would be sustaining the behavior for more than 6 months. So there is a decisional balance. It's one of the constructs of the Transthetical Model, and this is when you're having to weigh the pros and cons as you move towards maintenance. So, looking at, let's continue with alcohol use. What are the pros to decreasing the use of alcohol or cutting it out completely from your life? What are the cons, or if any, as you move to maintenance? Self-efficacy also plays a role in this model. So confidence improves as you move towards maintenance, right? Those first 6 months might be a little rocky, like I'm not sure if I can do this. I don't know if I can really be sober. But once you move towards maintenance, that self-efficacy, like, okay, I can do this, I got it. As you move into 6 months or more, that self-efficacy moves up. Now, relapse does happen. It often happens when people are stressed, if they have a lack of social supports, or if they have certain triggers, a return to familiar environments. So someone that's sober that enters a bar, that may be a trigger for them, and it may result in a relapse. So know that this occurs, and that this is on a continuum, and that some people move back and forth through these stages of change. So here's another picture. This one is showing you exercise and healthy eating, so weight loss. Pre-contemplation, this is, they're not even really thinking about it usually at this stage, but here you can kind of see in his mind, he started maybe just a little thinking, oh no, this cheeseburger might result in me being overweight and causing me to have a heart attack and possibly die from that. Then contemplation, like, okay, I think I can, start working out. I want to change my body from this to this. Preparation, reading up on some healthy tips. How am I going to do this, right? Am I going to get a gym membership? Am I going to learn some new recipes to cook? Action, actually doing it, right? Working in those stages. Then maintenance. So they've been doing it for more than 6 months now. But remember that there can always be a relapse and a change back to the past here. So those are all of our theories for intrapersonal level of change. So we're going to move on to interpersonal level theories. And the one that we're going to pinpoint the most here is the social cognitive theory. And here the behavior is explained via three-way dynamic reciprocal theory. And it's when personal factors, environmental influences, and behaviors continually interact. So the key concepts here are behavioral capability, outcome expectations, self-efficacy again is listed here, collective efficacy, self-regulation, observational learning, and incentive motivation. So here is showing you that three-way reciprocal determinism. They all interact with one another to determine human behavior. So here you'll see cognitive factors. These are those personal factors, our knowledge, our expectations, and our attitudes. The behavioral factors, the skills, practice, self-efficacy. And then environmental factors, social norms, access in the community, influence on others, the ability to change our environment. Those all interact with one another to determine that health human behavior, right? And this, remember, is called our social cognitive theory. So it's talking about those three determinants and how they work with one another. Here are some definitions for that social cognitive theory. It goes into much more detail. I'm not going to read these to you, but I want you to take some time and look at these definitions for our outcome expectations, our self-efficacy, our collective efficacy. I want you to pinpoint the difference in collective and self-efficacy. So the collective is for the group's ability to perform actions to bring about a desired change. So if this is regarding community members, willingness and ability to change. Self-regulation, controlling oneself through self-monitoring and goal setting, feedback, self-rewards. Behavioral capability, providing tools, resources, or environmental change that make those behaviors easier. Observational learning, based on observing similar individuals or role models perform that behavior. And then incentive motivation, what rewards and or punishments are going to help modify that behavior. All right, we just talked about the different intrapersonal theories and interpersonal theories, and now we're moving on to the community level theories. The one that I want to pinpoint the most here is going to be the diffusion of innovations, and this addresses how new ideas, products, and social practices spread within a society or from one society to another. Here, it's important to note how that happens. So there is what we call an adoption curve, and this is a great visual to show you how this occurs over time and the different categories of those that adopt new practices. So let's think of an example here. What about the use of reusable, recyclable water bottles? Let's say this is new and up and coming, and people have been using plastic water bottles forever, and now we have a new program that's influencing the use of these special water bottles. So as this is adopted in this diffusion of innovations theory, we're going to have our innovators. This is less than 3% of the population, and they are independent risk takers. They want to try new ideas. They are not the most respected individuals. They seek information on their own. They're kind of the wild bunch of the group, and they're going to jump on board first thing. They're going to try it out. They're going to see if they like it. They're going to do the new thing, right? Then you have your early adopters. This is 14%. These are respected members of the community. They have powerful influence on other potential adopters, and they're seen as opinion leaders, right? So these individuals are key to if a program or an initiative or a product goes well or not, these early adopters, because they are seen as those opinion leaders. They're looked up to. They're seen as trendy in this adoption. Then you have your early majority here, 34%, greatly influenced by the mass media and those opinion leaders. So if those opinion leaders are doing it, then these early majority individuals are hopping on board. They need lots of contact with peers, but they don't hold many leadership positions because they're kind of the followers, but they're still early on the adoption process. Then we have our late majority. This is 34%. They're a little skeptical, maybe, of the change. They tend to wait until an innovation is kind of the norm before they adopt anything new. Their motivation is really influenced by peers, and they don't like much risk or the uncertainty of things. And then our laggards, that last 16%, they're very traditional and conservative. They tend to have less education. They have narrow and restricted communication networks, so they're a little bit more cut off. They're suspicious of new things and adverse to risk. So they don't like risk. They don't like change and new things. Complete opposite of those innovators, those less than 3% for our adoption. So remember, this is part of that diffusion of innovations theory. And it can be really important for those community level theories on how they can be successful in being implemented. All right, so let's quickly look at some of these principles that cross all of our theories. So acquiring behaviors is a process where people are at different stages, right? Not everyone is ready to change, or they may be at different levels of readiness. Knowledge may or may not be sufficient for behavior change. They may not know enough to make those behavior changes. Individual motivation is so important, right? That self-efficacy is so important. Beliefs and values matter. What's important to the individual is important to the behavior. Social relationships and norms are also important. The people that are surrounding you influence your behaviors. And behavior is not independent of context. Right, so which theory are you going to use for your program? What constructs from the theory will you focus on? What strategies will you include that enhance or are related to those constructs? Start thinking about that, guys, because that is our next step in developing our rationale and getting one step closer to developing your program. Right, let me know if you have any questions, and that concludes Module 3.